Ready?
Quick little cough there. Hi, Priscilla. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our distributed telethon for Giving Tuesday. I'm super excited to be joined this evening by Priscilla Mollard. She is a pandemic era fellow, which is amazing and takes a lot of work and dedication. So thank you so much. And in addition to that fun thing, she is also a field archaeologist who has spoken before a little bit about the concept of, I feel like I should put like jerk quotes on vampire burial, because I presume like some of it's not actually like vampire. But we came away from that talk with so many questions, and also we all want to join the field school. So we're still waiting for field school opportunities, want to do. So Priscilla is going to share a little bit about her work and what she does and what we mean when we say vampire burial, how you identify such a thing, a little bit of history about it, and then we'll do some questions after she tells us a little bit about what it's all about. So I'm going to hand over to Priscilla. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the field school is up and running, so if you want to come and join me, you can, but we can talk about that later. So yeah. I do field archaeology. I'm also what you would call more of a bioarchaeologist working in the lab. And what I specialize in is basically archaeological context of human burials. But currently I'm working in Eastern Europe, and I'm specifically working in the part of Romania that is Transylvania. And you would think that, oh, of course, vampire burials, we're going to be coming from Transylvania. We're going to be coming from Romania. But actually, the majority of what is recorded and what is known as a vampire burial comes from either Poland or Italy, which is a strange sort of, not coincidence, but strange happening that makes you wonder, well, is that because the majority of the burials that were subjected to this treatment, and the treatment is called apotropaic treatment, were the majority of these people living in these areas, or is that just where we have sort of maintained the evidence? Because that's the trick with archaeology or any field-based science, really. You only know what you know because somebody found it and excavated it correctly in such a way that you preserve those details. So whether there are other burials that we would call apotropaic or vampire burials from other parts of the world, maybe there are, but they just weren't really documented very well or excavated very carefully. So it's hard to say. But we definitely have several really prominent examples that are the go-to images that people have in their mind. I think everybody's thought of or seen that image of the skull with the brick in its mouth. Now, this could mean that that was an apotropaic treatment that the dead was subjected to, that a brick was forced into her mouth. Or it could have been, settling of the ground and a brick just sort of slid in there over the years. It's very difficult to recreate some of these contexts. But the important thing to note really is what's going on here. So we know it's an apotropaic burial because we know that there's something different. There will be burial positions and burial alignments that will vary from group to group and time to time, but they all kind of correspond to a basic template. You're either going to be positioned like this or with your arms down. Maybe your arms will be up or this way. You're going to be aligned in certain positions. Maybe you're going to be in a flexed burial if you're trying to conserve space in the cemetery. Very few burials are going to be bricks inserted into the mouth or nails driven into the skull or the hands or something like that. So when we know that we have an apotropaic practice, we have to ask, all right, well, what was the purpose of this practice? And that's the whole premise behind archaeology or bioarchaeology, is we have these details about the body. We have either the material evidence or we have the biological consequences of some kind of material being inflicted on the body. So the brick or the nails or something like that. But what does that tell us about the person who was subjected to this treatment, or what does that tell us about the group or the culture or the village or the town or whatever that person belonged to. So with vampire burials, the interesting thing is, was this person singled out for this treatment because everyone was attempting to punish the person? So when you have somebody buried in shackles, for example, that tells you something about their social status, that tells you something about the conditions in which they entered death or in which they died or became dead. But with the vampire burials, was this about punishing the person or, sticking the person into their grave in this time and place? Or was it about something else? And generally speaking, when we look at the folklore, what we think we know about vampires, so the undead or people who come back from the dead, a lot of what we think that we know actually comes from Victorian, Edwardian, Gothic, literary sources. We think that this represents more folkloric, more Eastern European traditions. And there are elements there, but sometimes there are things that really miss the mark. So, for example, in Romania, they don't have vampires per se in folklore, but they do have strigoi. And I talked about this on my first talk that I ever did with Salon. They have strigoi, and you become strigoi after you die. Or maybe you were always a strigoi, or you were always going to turn into a strigoi, but you don't actually manifest that until you die. But basically, there are things in life that you do or that you are. Maybe you're the seventh son of a seventh son. Maybe you're a redhead. Things like that happen to you in your lifetime, or that you do, maybe your behavior, that will single you out to be a strigoi. And when you're a strigoi, you come back after you die. You come back and you cause trouble within your own bloodline. So you come back to your wife, or you come back to your mother's house, or something like that. And what happens to the body of a person who is a strigoi, or who is believed to become a strigoi, those are apotropaic practices, because they're treatment that is subjected to the body after death. But the purpose is not to punish that person or to hunt the vampire, kill the vampire. It's to make it so that the person no longer comes back and causes the harm that they're causing. It's to make sure that the person is able to pass on, basically. So you really have to look at these practices. They're usually about fixing the person into the grave, but that's usually because the soul needs to move on and realize that it's dead, something along those lines. Annetta, I think you had some questions.
I do. I just wrote down a bunch more. So the first question I wanted to ask before we do anything else is how did you end up in this very specific subcategory of archaeology? Did you choose this on purpose? Was this like a path, or did you come through a winding path to get there?
So it started, for whatever reason, I always wanted to be an archaeologist. I don't really know why that would be. I am the exact right age to have seen Indiana Jones and all of that stuff, which you're not supposed to say is the reason you went into archaeology. But it is, though, for most of us around my age. So I went to a field school. I went to an archaeological field school in Central America. And I expected to be excavating structures, temples, fun stuff like that. And then we realized that we were not looking at a temple complex. We were looking at sort of hinterland, so away from the major center. We were looking at a residential complex. So I thought, oh, okay, that's fine. It's a house, very pretty floor that I'm getting to see. That's cool. But then we went under the floor, and I did not know that for the Maya and for other Central American groups, you buried your dead in your home. You buried your dead under the floor of your home. So every family home had multiple generations of ancestors buried there. So two things happened really in that particular field school. I realized that I was so much more interested in the burials than I was, the temples or the big structures. But I also had the chance to sort of look around at us and what we were doing and how we were doing it. And I realized, this is very, very cool, but should we be doing this? Should a bunch of 20-year-olds who have never held any archaeological tools ever, be excavating all of these human burials? And why are we doing it? So this really brought me to the kind of bioarchaeology that I do, where you do have to begin by really asking yourself, okay, but why am I doing this? So the collection that I work on currently, it was not excavated because oh, cool, cemetery, let's dig it up. It was excavated because it had to be relocated because of EU funding. So there were multiple, socio-economic, political things going on. The cemetery was going to be excavated, period. It had to be dug up. So the question then was, do you excavate the remains and throw them away, which is done in parts of the world? Do you excavate the remains and stick them in boxes and never look at them ever? Or do you try to do something that could potentially give back to, the descent community by studying them, by answering questions about the town? So this is what really drove the kind of specific work that I do.
So the other thing I was thinking about as you were talking is where is the line between folklore and practical village life with these kinds of stories? Is it I think when we think of vampires, we think, like you said, we think of Bram Stoker, or we think of vampire hunters with stakes. And all of that comes in an elaborate path through literature and folklore. But is that what these people were responding to with these burials? Or was it something more practical and real in their community? Did they think these people were strigoi or whatever because of having heard stories like folklore? Or did they think they were coming back from the dead because of growing fingernails or something like that?
I personally think that a lot of the strigoi in particular, a lot of the mythos and a lot of the practice, because this is something that is practiced surrounding strigoi, has a lot to do with grief and the way grief is processed and how we are allowed to or not allowed to grieve. Because a lot of times with strigoi, you would have, a wife whose husband will not stay down, or vice versa. They keep coming to the house at night and they hear them, and their health is suffering. And I wonder how much of that is that village life does not really give you the time to say, I'm traumatized and I'm grieving and I need to just not be responsible for anyone and everything while I process this. So I wonder how much of it is an extension of, I'm grieving and I shouldn't be, so something must be, physically wrong because the mental pain is too difficult. So there must be a physical reason. But, if you were to ask a villager, this is all very real. It's all very real, and there are procedures and consequences. I was just watching a TikTok, actually. The algorithm is that good. I was watching where it was a Romanian woman, and I think the whole TikTok was like, oh, you see the widow going to the cemetery. That's interesting. And the next day she's going with horses and a shovel, and then it's, oh, run. So it's very real. It's real. I think it also has some bearing on grieving practices, but it's also very real.
And how widespread is this? How many of these do you think? I mean, obviously, you said you've only know the ones that have been found and documented correctly, but how common is this practice?
I wonder how much of it is lost to time and lost to bad excavation. And I've already said, certain parts of the world, like Romania, Americans or Western archaeologists are terrified of going to Romania. It's weird. It's weird. The misconceptions that a lot of people have of just entering the country. So I think that a lot of us are reluctant to work there. So I think that a lot of things in, Romania, rest of Eastern Europe that maybe could be discovered or systematically excavated, if necessary, have not been because of just reluctance. So if you don't go and look for the data, you're not going to find it. So I think it was probably a lot more prevalent than we have reconstructed it to have been.
So a lot of potential for future discoveries and more. So the last thing I wanted to ask you before we sort of wrap up this section is tell us a little bit more about this field school. I didn't realize you'd opened it, so tell us about it.
Yes, yeah, it is happening this summer. We have the website; it is up and ready. However, and I could hand out links to whoever is interested. Just it's still in the like a couple words. Just say exclamation point dash dash, like I need to fill in some things.
Okay.
About me photo, my the web designer is my brother, so he's got some jokes. So the about me photo is not flattering. And a couple of things will change. But yeah, we have a website, we have the program. Middle of July, if anybody would like to actually come and attend a field school and learn how to analyze and process analyze and prepare human bones for study, hit me up.
And where is it going to happen?
In Baia Mare, Romania, where I work with my field collection. So
fantastic.
Yeah, the collection was, I almost said ethically sourced. That's not quite what I mean, but it was a salvage excavation. Whenever something is referred to as a salvage excavation, that means that it was not excavated just for the hell of it. There was, it had to be excavated.
Okay. Well, yeah, definitely shoot me a link to that and we will share it. There were many inquiries after last time, so I'm excited about that. I would love to go to Romania. So I think that we're going to wrap this one up so that we can close this session and prepare. The next one that we have coming up is at 9 p.m. Martin Strauss, Salon Fellow from San Francisco, will be playing, who you may have seen. He lugs a piano to Salon, has many times. And so he will be playing a little home concert at his house. So we will be doing that at 9 p.m. You can see that on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you happen to be. And before we head out, Priscilla, today's Giving Tuesday. We're doing this in order to raise money so that we can reopen in the new year and so that we can launch our podcast project and continue bringing more people into our web like you. Last I checked, we were coming in at just over $11,000, I think 11,314. Would you like to say a few words about why you're a part of Salon and why people should throw their cash at us?
Yeah, I have actually wanted to be part of Salon for a long time, but my oldest and dearest friend is Isolde Honore, and I would see things that she was doing, and it was kind of like, that's interesting. That would be cool. And then I moved away from the Bay Area, and I thought, well, that's it for me then. And then during the pandemic, she asked, oh, do you have anything spooky that you could talk about? And I thought, yeah, I do. I do have something spooky. So I was really excited to join Salon, and I think it is just the coolest organization. And I think anytime that you can, really as a community support something that gives back to this special community that is maybe not always that well represented elsewhere, I think that's really great. And I've just heard, some stuff about some podcasts and things like this. And I'm just getting into podcasts because I'm very behind the times. So anything that brings together all of these elements, I think is just the coolest thing to support.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you will come back to us for that podcast. It's going to be a whole thing that we're doing with a little bit longer segments. Do we have any updates from the donations desk? All right. We're going to wrap this one up, and we will see everyone back at this desk at 9 p.m. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much, Priscilla, for joining us late night from the East Coast. We'll see the rest of you soon in like an hour or so. Okay. Thanks.